Support for Your Fantastic Mind, provided by Southern Company Foundation.
Welcome to Your Fantastic Mind. I'm Jay Watson, and welcome to Sawney Dog Retreat in Douglasville, Georgia, where dogs come to spend the day or longer and play with their pack of friends. We have long called them man's best friend, and we certainly invest in this relationship. Americans spend close to $100 billion a year on our pets, and a big chunk of that goes to our dogs. Many owners say they spend more on their dog's health than their own. We do it because we love our dogs. They provide us comfort and companionship. They're always happy to see us, at least we think so. Which brings us to them, our dogs. How do they feel about us? Do they love us, or do they love that we feed them? Are they jealous? Can they do math? This week, we get a fascinating glimpse inside the brains of our dogs and learn the sometimes surprising answers to these questions.
Excellent. All right, go back to where you were before. Tell them to stay.
Patrick, between these two. Tamara, you're to the right of the last dog I called.
At Comprehensive Pet Therapy in Atlanta on a Sunday afternoon, the pack is on its best behavior.
Nice. That's better, pack.
Well, maybe not all of them. The dogs and their owners do various drills and skills together.
Hey, good job, buddy.
But make no mistake,
The first down stay.
this is not a dog obedience or training class.
We're going to be peering into your dog's mind.
It's an audition.
Welcome to the tryouts for the MRI Dog Project.
Emory University professor of psychology and neuroscientist Dr. Gregory Berns
One of the aspects we'll be testing today.
and dog trainer Mark Spivak joined forces 9 years ago.
We're going to have you bring your dog about here.
Before then, Berns was studying human decision-making. But then this happened.
Today there was a report that those 24 Navy SEALs who moved in on Osama bin Laden in those 40 minutes had help from a fearsome colleague.
Osama bin Laden was killed, and on the mission with the 24 Navy SEALs was a dog named Cairo.
I saw these photos and this footage of these dogs jumping out of helicopters and wearing, goggles and ear protection. And I'm probably the only person who saw that and said, if dogs can be trained to jump out of helicopters, we could probably train them to go into MRI scanners. Yeah, grew up with dogs all my life. Always had dogs.
Berns lives with his own pack.
All right, this is Cato. He's a plot hound, but he likes balls. He also is known as Sir Bark-a-Lot. We have Argo, the yellow dog. Finally, we have Thor, the German Shepherd. Hey, come on, go.
And then there is Callie, the rat terrier, adopted from a shelter at 9 months.
I say, truthfully, that Callie has changed my life. I went to Mark, who I knew from training our other dogs, and I said, do you think we could figure out a way to train dogs to go in the scanner?
Suddenly, Berns went from studying humans
You get one for watching too.
to this.
Callie just happened to be available.
Berns built an MRI simulator in his basement.
She enjoyed it, I enjoyed it, and then it actually worked. Let's do some training. That's when it took over my life.
Berns founded the Dog Project to research evolutionary questions about man's best and oldest friend. Dogs are the first domesticated animal. Sorry, cats. When humans finally put down roots and began living in communities thousands of years ago, our relationship with dogs began.
When people started settling down, the wolves that were hanging around eventually turned into the dogs. And nobody knows how exactly that happened. But the end result is that the animals that became dogs have properties that we selected for living with us. These are the animals that we either purposely selected or they self-selected for wanting to be with us. First, probably for the food that we gave them, but very quickly for companionship.
Researchers have found graves of early humans buried with their dogs. This is a 12,000-year-old tomb from North Israel showing a woman with her hand resting on her dog. The bond was there then, and 12,000 years later, Berns was going to decipher it.
The military started funding the project and funded it for roughly 6 years.
Over 8 years, Berns and Spivak have trained over 100 dogs for the MRI, to wear protective earplugs, to lie down, to put their head in a chin rest, to be still for minutes at a time, to get used to the noise of the scanner.
We're the first to train dogs to go in an MRI, completely awake, unrestrained, meaning no leashes, no straps or anything, and collect usable data from their brains while they're engaged in an actual task. And Callie was the first dog to do that. I still remember the first day that we did that first scan with Callie.
We judge dogs by breed, by their looks, by their behavior. Berns' research eliminated the external, going straight to the ultimate source, their brains, discovering the truth of how dogs see, interact, and feel about the world and us.
They perform jobs for us that no other animal does. They detect explosives, they detect drugs, they search for missing persons, they detect bodies, they detect cancer. We ask them to do all sorts of things. And so, again, we don't know how they're doing it. We really don't have a clue. They help people. They act as assistance dogs, emotional support animals, service dogs.
In the 8 years since he founded the Dog Project, Berns has given dog lovers around the world an unprecedented look inside the brains of dogs.
Something like 80 million households in this country have dogs. You know, almost half the households in this country have a dog. So they are incredibly important to people. We expend a lot of money on them. Many of us treat them like family members, and so it's like, why wouldn't you want to know something more about a family member that you live with, that you share your bed with?
While making the switch from human to dog neuroscience made sense to Berns, it was not initially celebrated by his peers.
My colleagues, though, thought, yes, this was crazy. But what can you possibly hope to get out of this? And even when we did the first experiment, the reaction was something like, great, you showed that dogs like hot dogs.
Berns and his team have shown much more than that by decoding dogs' brains one study at a time. What they have learned paints our family pets in a whole new light. Berns' team has discovered that dogs have an innate ability to process human faces, that there is a region in the temporal lobe of dogs dedicated to processing faces. It's a big deal because this is something known to exist in people and primates. It helps to explain dogs' incredible sensitivity for reading human social cues. Distinguishing faces is important for social creatures, and dogs are social.
I've had many dogs, it's like, who isn't their friend, right? Everyone's their friend.
Looking at dogs' heightened sense of smell, Berns and his team learned that a dog's brain responds strongest to the scent of a familiar person rather than to scents of familiar dogs or people they don't know. This speaks to the powerful connection between dogs and their people. Berns and his team even looked at if dogs are jealous, measuring activities in dogs' amygdalas, an area associated with arousal. What they learned is that jealousy depends more on a dog's temperament, with more aggressive dogs showing more jealousy.
Hi, Loki. You having fun? You want to sit?
Berns also studied dogs' ability to understand language. Many of us think our dogs know what we are saying.
Good girl, you're so sweet. Oh, yes, baby.
What words does she know?
She knows I love you. She definitely knows that. She definitely gets a smile on her face when I say that.
Really?
Yeah, she does.
Girl, good girl.
They understand what?
So if I say, do you want, they know that follows something. Like, do you want to go to the park? Do you want food? Do you want to go outside? Hi, guys. It might be just like the way I say it, how my voice goes up. You're such a good girl. Or it could be they know the actual words. I'm not sure.
Our dogs seem to understand basic commands. So Berns and his team taught dogs the names of 2 new toys, words they hadn't heard before, monkey and piggy. In the MRI, Eddie, a golden retriever lab mix, was one of a dozen dogs who saw their owners hold up the toys and say their names. Then the owner spoke gibberish words, such as babu and bodmik, holding up other toys. The surprising result is opposite of humans. We recognize gibberish and don't try to understand it, but the dogs showed greater activation in regions of the brain to the made-up words instead of the trained words. This means dogs can tell the difference between words they've heard before and those they haven't. Berns says their heightened response to gibberish may be because our dogs can tell we want them to understand what we are saying, and so they try to do that, figure it out. And did you know that dogs can naturally count? They can't count to 10, but they have an innate sense of how many treats you put in their bowl. Berns and his team showed dogs different numbers of dots on a black screen. The dogs' brains recognize the change in the number of dots. People and primates have a dedicated brain region for quantities, and it looks like dogs have one too. Berns says it's the strongest evidence yet that most mammals are born to count, if not do higher math. They also discovered that you can predict which dogs will be good service dogs. Dogs who had more activity in the brain region that has the most dopamine receptors, the caudate nucleus, made better candidates. Those dogs also had less activity in the amygdala, the part of the brain associated with fear and anxiety. So, our dogs process faces, know some language, respond strongly to their known people, experience jealousy, and know if you're giving them extra treats. But Berns and his team went to the place closest to dog owners' hearts. They wanted to research love. Do our dogs love us, or do they love that we feed them?
First question is, certainly I've had, and everyone I know who has dogs has, is, does my dog love me? Not just for the food I give them, but do they have kind of anything like an emotion that we would put the label love on?
For this neuroscientist, the love study was personal. His name was Newton, Berns' dog of 15 years who died in 2010.
He wasn't particularly obedient, and he was just kind of a clown, but you know, he slept in my armpit every night. That's where he slept. I missed him, and I kind of wondered, in retrospect, kind of what he thought of me, kind of what that whole thing had been about. You know, what were those 15 years to him? Was I just the person who fed him and kind of kept him warm at night, or was it something more?
Berns set about answering something most dog owners have wondered at some point. Is it me or the treats? For his study, the team did experiments with 15 dogs. Dogs were shown a hairbrush, a toy car, or a toy horse. They were given hot dog after one object, praise from their owner after another, and nothing after the third. The results of the study showed that 13 of 15 dogs' brains were stimulated by praise as much or more than food.
Then we have other dogs who were at the other end of the spectrum, who according to their brain really didn't care so much about praise and were really all about the food. And so those were the chow hounds.
What about the small dog, the next to last dog?
Which brings us back to the audition.
Millie, come.
Why would these dog owners want to undergo all this training for their dogs to go into an MRI?
I just want to know, what is she saying? What is she trying to tell me?
What is it you're thinking when you chase the gardener when he's blowing the yard?
I would say, who's your favorite? Who does he love more, mom or dad?
I would like to know what makes her so constantly joyful, because she's always in a happy mood.
So we use the command coil.
In order to get those answers, their dogs have to do well on assessments.
That's great.
Show promise. Some do, some don't.
So it's more a test of anxiety or absence of anxiety.
If you're invited to join the project.
After tryouts end, it feels a bit like Survivor.
I gave her mostly 4s and 5s.
A bunch of dogs are getting voted off the MRI island.
I gave him a 0.
We can't have them like flip-flopping around.
Some, like Riley the Golden, aren't written off completely.
In my comments, I wrote immature but potential. Zoe.
I mean, she did really, really well.
Zoe the Doodle is a standout. She's already a trained therapy dog.
Yeah, I think there were very few weaknesses with Zoe.
Hey, high five. Yeah, good girl. Yeah, yeah, thank you. You're so good. You're so good.
So the experiment is really simple. It's really just what's called classical conditioning, which is the same as Pavlovian conditioning. And we're going to hold up objects, and after each object, something's going to happen. It'll either be food or praise.
Every time a truck is held up, Zoe's owner, Danielle McAfee, praises her.
Good girl, Zoe.
Every time a toy horse is held up, Zoe gets a bite of hot dog. And every time a hairbrush is held up, Zoe gets nothing.
We'll do one more round.
There are a few hiccups, but overall she does well.
Good job.
There is more training before the real thing.
I mean, dogs are just fascinating. They're just amazing creatures, and we can't speak to them. So I just really wanted to know a little bit more about what's going on in her mind.
Today, Danielle McAfee will be part of the experiment to see if her dog loves treats, or her, or both.
Yeah, you ready? Let's go. Go on. All the way. All the way. There you go. Good girl.
So what we just did was a structural scan, and that would be like a standard MRI scan that a human would get just looking at the shape of the brain. And we use that to scan for abnormalities, but also just to give us a roadmap to what we're looking at when they're doing tasks. Taking slices from top to bottom of her brain. Her nose is pointed towards the top, and you can see those are her eyeballs. We're focusing on a specific brain region associated with reward. It's the same in dogs as in humans. It's where the most dopamine receptors are, and it's right here, kind of dead center in the brain.
The caudate nucleus in dogs and humans is a reward area, and it can show Berns what a dog likes.
Good girl, Zoe. Good girl.
As Zoe does the experiments, Berns is measuring which parts of her brain are activated.
Beautiful.
Come on now, good girl. Yes, you did so good.
Danielle will find out if Zoe loves treats, or her, or both, in a few days.
Humans created dogs, and by the same token, also created their suffering for when we abandon them. Now, do they experience emotional pain and emotional distress? And I would say the evidence is very clear-cut that yes, they do.
All right. He's been through a lot, just like me.
Hakeem Gunthorpe has been arrested 41 times.
Good boy. A couple drugs, possessions, theft by taking. That's a good boy. You want to stay lights out?
This time he thinks he can make it on the outside, in part because of Comet the dog.
See, Comet comes from a tough background like myself. He was abused, misused, and abandoned.
Hakeem is Comet's handler in the nonprofit program Canine Cellmates.
We are a jail dogs program operating here in Fulton County Jail. What that means is we pull dogs from an open intake shelter where they're at risk of being euthanized. We move them over here into the jail where they live 24 hours a day with inmate handlers. It's a training program, so we have training classes 5 days a week, led by a certified trainer. The men are given the tools necessary to be able to train the dogs in basic obedience.
Sit. Good boy, good boy.
Dogs in shelters and the people incarcerated are abandoned by society. people would rather not think about them because they're uncomfortable things to think about.
We have 6 beautiful dogs this cycle.
For 10 weeks, the inmate handlers and the dogs work together, live together, learn together.
There's something special about this time, the whole learning, the positive reinforcement, the reshaping my behavior, the dogs as well. It works for humans.
This program is a volunteer-driven organization.
Today is graduation day.
You ready, buddy? Let's show these people some things. Wait. Ah, good boy. See, some of y'all couldn't do that at the DMV, huh? Come on. High five. Good boy. All right.
Comet is ready to be adopted.
First, I want to thank God.
Akeen will soon be released. The program is turning men's lives around, redirecting their futures beyond these walls. 10 weeks together, human and canine both emerge, changed for the better.
Changed my life. I can't.
Canine Cellmates saves people and dogs.
Dogs are magical beings, in my opinion. I don't think that God gave any other animals what he gave to dogs, which is the ability to look inside a human being, find that good that exists in there, and then help that person to see that in themselves.
Good boy.
You want to know your results? You want to know? Yeah? What's inside your brain?
Danielle and Zoe visit Dr. Berns in his lab to get Zoe's results.
I think she's probably people motivated, like praise oriented.
We have analyzed Zoe's data from the experiment.
Okay.
And what we're looking at here are pictures of her brain, specifically in the reward center, which is right there. And so the fact that it's all reds and yellows means that it was more active to the prospect of praise than the prospect of food. This is highly significant in the sense that the activity is really all about the prospect of praise.
So you do love me? That's really awesome.
Quite simply, Zoe loves her owner more than she loves food. Those are dream results for any dog owner.
I can tell you she's in the top 25% of dogs for praise.
That's awesome.
Berns' research has led him to write best-selling books.
When you start looking at these brains,
has earned him global recognition, unending media attention, and people eager to pepper him with questions about their dogs. He wishes everyone understood one thing.
I wish people understood that dogs are individuals, just like people. The signal in each individual frame is really quite small.
Berns' dog project is far from finished.
What we're trying to do now is go beyond kind of just a simple brain response being more or less for one condition or another, and actually going and looking at the entire brain of the dog simultaneously and literally decode what they are thinking.
Yeah.
So how do dogs understand, say, human displays of affection? Do they understand what that means? When they see cars, do they understand that a car is inanimate or is it animate to them? They seem, in many cases, to act like it's alive.
The unadulterated joy dogs take in the smallest things, how easy it is for them to make friends, how quick they are to forgive, how eager they are to give and receive love. Berns believes science can show us where in a dog's brain that comes from, and maybe we can use that to improve our own lives.
I think the most important reason to study dogs is they are the best example of making friends. We all want friends, and they can tell us something. There's something in their brains about how we can be better in society and be happier. And I think that's probably the most compelling reason to keep trying to figure out what's going on in their head. If we can figure this out, I think there would be tremendous benefits for mental health, human mental health.
Dogs are part of our families, and science is showing their intellect and ability to connect with us and other animals is something from which we all can benefit and learn. Signing off from Sawney Dog Retreat in Douglasville, Georgia, I'm Jay Watson. See you next time on Your Fantastic Mind.
Support for Your Fantastic Mind, provided by Southern Company Foundation.